Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. I'd like to welcome in former Mayor Joseph Paolino into the
Hi,
studio.
Kate.
Thanks for coming in today.
Good to be with you.
I appreciate it. To tell folks who are watching right now where things are at with the Case Mead lofts.
I believe it will be opening them up probably in about another few weeks, in mid-March. 44 micro-loft apartments. We have 50% of them already.
That was my next question.
50%, the entire second floor and third floor are all taken, and we're just working on the fourth and the fifth. We still get some construction, make sure the fire codes and the building codes are all proper, but things have been moving. Furniture's all moved in there. There are beds, there are couches, stoves, refrigerators. The place looks beautiful.
So 50% occupancy. Talk with us, so how many more units are available?
Well, there's about 22 more.
Okay, because that's how many per floor?
I don't know. You got me.
Well, when we're going through the tour, we'll see them because these are micro lofts.
Yeah.
So who's been interested? Who's been signing up and saying this is where I want to live?
You know, today I had a call from some friends that had big jobs here in Rhode Island. They moved to New London.
Okay.
They bought a beautiful home right on the water. They could see New York. And I got a call today and said they wanted to get a place in Providence. They wanted to be in the micro loft. So this is a husband and wife in their mid-50s, and they want a place in Providence. We have students from Johnson & Wales, graduate students. We have medical students. We have other professionals that work in the downtown.
So it's a mix.
In fact, I had a company that moved in one of our buildings, and they wanted to take 5 apartments for employees in their company.
Can you tell me who this company is?
Alliance Security.
Fantastic. So they want it for their employees to say, great location, here they are.
Great.
And
Yep.
plus, as you said, you can see through the windows because there had been the scaffolding outside. Now you can see the beds in there. So it's kind of like you can just kind of move right in.
I think it's going to be one of the nicest developments we've seen of downtown living. Micro-lofts is a new thing. The arcade started it. But we really went the extra mile and put in all new furniture and really did over the building. We spent, I'd say, close to $9 million on this entire development.
Wow. Okay. Are you surprised at the level of interest? I mean, what's the demand for housing downtown right now?
Downtown. I mean, downtown has become very hot, and something's going on. I think the students, Brown, Rhode Island School of Design, Johnson & Wales definitely has brought about a great deal of life in our downtown. I think a lot of the restaurants that have been opening up is helping. There are more companies moving into Providence. I got to tell you, with what the Department of Commerce and what the governor have done, giving various tax credits and incentives to try to hire more people. All of that demand is all working together. It's just not one thing by itself, but it's everything together.
Okay, so looking for a spring completion date. If we could turn this camera around right now, you can see it though when we're in between breaks, what's going on across the street here. So, question for you, you've got the New London family. Any folks in Rhode Island from like a Narragansett or a Newport that just want a crash pad in Providence, or is that a little bit of a stretch?
Well, I consider these people from New London, Rhode Island people, because they have lived here all their life. They had a home in Providence and they had a home in Bristol. And they sold both.
Okay, so they had that combination before.
They had that combination, and they have had top positions in government.
Fantastic. So two more floors to sell? Or did you say 3?
We have second rented, the third rented. Now we're working on the fourth and the fifth.
Fourth and the fifth.
And right now they're just building back there the second stairway. The building looks great. I'm more pleased than I thought I would be with it.
Well, I am very interested for when GoLocal's going to be able to take a tour very soon, I should hope.
We hope so.
Of the lofts, so we can show you what they look like.
I don't want to put a hard hat on you, so I want to get the construction done because I don't want to see anybody get hurt in case if there's an accident. That
is true. I've worn hard hats before though, but we'll wait for it to be completed. So what's next?
Well, after I finish this, I'd like to do the. We're in the middle of building the Hilton Homeward Suite Hotel, which is on Parcel 12, the Triangle, which is near the Capitol Grill, near the post office, the Pastoria Post Office.
It's a very central location.
So it's a great location. You see this. I see the steel going up every day. Workers there. The windows are being put in. It's really cool looking at that. But when the microlofts get done, I'm waiting for bids to come back now from contractors to do the boutique hotel that I want to do, named after my mom, the Beatrice Hotel, right on Westminster Street that goes all the way to Kennedy Plaza. That's going to be a cool project, but I got to get the microlofts done first.
One thing at a time.
Well, I don't want to do too many things. That's when
Two things at a time.
Too many, when the eggs start dropping, then you have a problem, and I want to make sure it's not a frittata.
Don't want a frittata. So you said you've got bids out. Do you have it? So once that's completed, I mean, what's the time frame? Your anticipated time frame on the hotel?
I would like to start construction before the summer starts.
Before the summer starts.
Yeah.
Okay. And is there going to be? Now, there's parking at the Homewood Suites, yes?
Yeah, there's parking in the Homewood Suites, absolutely.
Are they going down?
I think it's one level down and on the ground floor because the hotel lobby is going to be on the second floor of that building. There's also parking in the Old Capitol Grill parking lot.
Yes.
And we have parking available if they have to in some of our other parking lots and garages that we have downtown. In regards to the Beatrice Hotel, there'll be parking underneath my main building, 100 Westminster Street, because at nighttime there's nobody parking there, so why not use it?
Now, did you mention with the Hotel Beatrice a rooftop restaurant?
There will be a rooftop. It's going to be really cool. And Serafina restaurant will be on the first floor. And then upstairs is not going to be a full restaurant, but it'll be more for hotel guests, various tenants of our buildings.
A little more of a club? A little clubby?
It'll be somewhat of a club, but I have to give I have fire codes, so I want to make sure we're not breaking any fire codes. And I want to give the residents of the hotel first opportunity to be there.
Okay. So we've got the hotel coming up. Now, we're in the shadow of the Casemate. We're also in the shadow of the Superman building.
Yeah,
and
I can see it over
as GoLocal had reported, there were some plans put forth to Hasbro, if they so choose to consolidate operations, for a new structure in downtown Providence. What's your thoughts on that?
I'm not going to comment about it because rumors aren't reality, and I want to wait and see what happens with reality.
See if we hear anything from Hasbro. We'll see moving forward. Question for you while I have you in here with working with the city. The city's economic director has moved on. Did you work with the economic director at all on this, or was this kind of really mostly private when you were working on this project?
I never did work with him. He was a very nice person, but we never worked. We worked with city council members. We worked really with the city council members and representatives of the mayor's office, but primarily it was the city council on what we had to do in Providence.
And now that we've got the Casemate Lofts here, there's a downtown neighborhood association. Do you envision working with other residents about the holistic approach to living and possibly working in downtown, but living in downtown?
Oh, absolutely. And we've had them host one of their monthly meetings at 100 Westminster Street in my building. And we had a nice communication with each other. And we're going to have a big grand opening in the month of March. I think we're looking at March 22nd or 26th. I'm not sure the exact date, but we'll let you know. We're going to invite the entire community down to take a look at what we've done.
That's going to be the big grand opening of the Casemate Lofts. Again, Superman building, you can just about see where the Hotel Beatrice is going to be. Now, I know you said only so many balls, so many eggs in the air at a time, but anything beyond that, Joe?
We are working on some other projects, but they're not signed yet, and I want to make sure that they get signed up first.
Okay. Anything else you want to share with folks while you're here in studio
I love
today?
the city. By the way, I love working in the city. I live here, I work here, I represented it at one time. At the same time, it's a challenging city to work on because of the great complications with regulatory process, trying to get financing to do things. And sometimes you have to fight City Hall in order to get things done. But so far, so good. And I don't want to go anywhere else. This is my home.
You want to be here. Well, you were very involved recently in sort of addressing the needs of downtown, especially Kennedy Plaza. Is there should the whole construct of Kennedy Plaza be rethought, or should we work within the confines of how it exists currently?
It wasn't designed for buses. It was designed for horse and buggy. I like it that they put some sculpture outside on a little area over there. I think the mayor's plan is to get rid of the automobiles or no, not automobiles, but the buses
Mm.
along Exchange Street.
Mm-hmm.
They want to concentrate the buses to be on the other side of Kennedy Plaza, which is on Washington Street. Um, I don't think that's a good location either, unless if they did drop off and pick up. But to make it a terminal, I don't think that's wise. I think they should put it another place. Now, they're talking temporarily until they go to the train station.
Yep.
I still believe that it belongs on Allen's Avenue and have all the social service agencies connected to it to help people who need food, who need shelter, because a lot of people have no place to go, so they hang at a bus station. Well, if you're going to do that, give them the social service agencies to be a part of that system. I thought Allen's Avenue would be a better facility for them.
You know, a lot of folks say, well, it is the central location. Is that just the mindset because that's how it's always been? Should we think outside the box in terms of public transportation and the needs of the entire population?
Well, I'll say that Kennedy Plaza was never the central location for buses. It was never. Buses were sprinkled out in all the different streets in Providence. When I was mayor, they tried to buffalo me into going along with that proposal, and I wouldn't do it because I said, you're going to put all the social ills into just one area and you don't have any plans. So I'm not for that. But to have buses in the city, you definitely need them to pick up and to drop off, but not to make it into a hub. It doesn't belong here.
And if it wasn't a hub, I mean, what could be a better and higher use? I mean, it's pretty much prime real estate.
Make Kennedy Plaza into a sculpture park with art and have artisans there painting every day when the weather is nice out. Have ice sculpture in the wintertime. Make it friendly. I think when Hasbro put that beautiful park there, Brendan's Beach, that is something nice. Having the ice skating rink is nice, and you could do more on the center using public art. And one of the things we're doing to every building of ours that we're doing a major rehab is our contribution to art is going to be lighting up these buildings at nighttime so people can see how beautiful historically these buildings have been detailed. And so when we get these Case Mead building done, at nighttime you'll see it lit up, so it'll be part of the fabric of the downtown.
Okay, very good. As you know, we see a little darkness from Superman, but other buildings are lighting up. Something could happen there moving forward, but you've got lots of projects, and I appreciate your taking the time to come in here and talk with us.
And this week, with it being Valentine's Week, you look at the top of 100 Westminster Street, and we're celebrating Valentine's Day with the beautiful heart.
With a little look for the heart when you're downtown in Providence here, and look to see the Case Mead Lofts as they are scheduled to open this spring and construction to get underway in the Hotel Beatrice right around the corner. Former Mayor Joe Palino, I appreciate your time taking the time to come in. I'll let you go around the corner.
All right.
Okay. Okay. Just want to thank Joe Palino for coming in, giving us an update on the Case Mead Lofts. If you've driven down Dorrance or Way Bossett, you can't help but have noticed the big construction project taking place. As he said, already at the 50% occupancy level, hasn't even opened up yet. There's going to be a big kickoff in March. GoLocal will certainly be there, keeping an eye on all things construction here downtown. Again, appreciate Joe taking the time to come in. We're going to get back to our regular Tuesday 4 o'clock guest, Jennifer Lawless at American University, right here in a second, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigate Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. I'd like to thank you for tuning into the 4 o'clock news and politics hour. Just had former Mayor Joe Paolino in to give us an update on the Case Mead loss just across the street from the studio here. But as we do every Tuesday, usually, check in with Jennifer Lawless down at American University about everything that's happening inside the Beltway, and there's plenty to talk about today. Jennifer, thanks for Skyping in.
My pleasure.
So one of the big stories, we can't discount it, it's pretty much the tops in the news everywhere, is the situation with Rob Porter in the White House. Who knew what and when? Now we learned today that the FBI has said that they told the White House about these allegations against Porter regarding domestic violence in his marriages before he was in the office. And it's in opposition to what we've been hearing from the administration. Does John Kelly's job hang in the balance?
I think there's no question. And it's not only that the White House knew, but new reporting today came out that Porter was actually up for a promotion. So not only did the White House know that information, but it wasn't going to keep them from allowing him to expand his portfolio and take on some issue domains beyond just being social secretary in general. So it's a major problem for John Kelly for two reasons. First, he was the one that was supposed to bring order and discipline to the White House, and this demonstrates that there was an information flow problem at best. The second reason it's a problem is because if there's not an information flow problem, then he's completely adopted the Donald Trump view of the world when it comes to women and when it comes to defending the men who abuse them. And this White House cannot have a president and a chief of staff who have a woman problem. The other thing I would note here that's really important and probably would be the reason for Kelly's dismissal is the manner in which he's handled it. So not handling Porter is one thing, but potentially lying to the press, maybe lying to the president, lying to the staff around him suggests that it's pretty difficult to come back from that. We've seen that with other people who have been dismissed from the White House.
And we've seen the reaction from the president following the revelation of these allegations, including some pretty damning evidence and pictures. The president continues to stand behind Rob Porter and not even mention anything pertaining to the situation. Do you think he'll address this at some point and acknowledge that now that we know the FBI knew that this was there?
No, because Donald Trump doubles down. I mean, this is somebody who not only defended Porter, but that's the second one, right? There's also Sorensen, who abused a wife, who not only defended Porter, but in the face of photographic evidence and a black eye, defended Porter. So this is not somebody who apologizes, who says that something was handled wrong, who backs down. He's not going to do that. I think the best that we can get is what we've already seen from Sarah Sanders, where she said, look, this person is no longer employed in the White House. What else do you people want? And that's pretty much the extent to which the White House makes apologies. So, you know, the good news is, no, he's not employed in the White House anymore. The bad news is that, you know, domestic violence was not taken seriously. And it's also bad news for Republicans who are running, especially in swing districts. They now have to distance themselves to the president, and we know that Donald Trump is retaliatory.
And, you know, here was a very, very bad week for the White House. There's no two ways about it. But let's talk, he'd had a kind of State of the Union bump, if you will. You know, is all that sort of goodwill lost when it's the latest sort of press mishap for this administration?
Yes. Now, I mean, he did get this bump, but if this wouldn't have happened, it's likely that when he went out and said that the Democrats may have, in fact, committed treason by not standing and clapping for him, that could have been the story of the week. So, you know, we're in a time right now where it's always something. And no, the State of the Union didn't get as much attention as we would have expected. But by the same token, neither did his comments suggesting that the Democrats are un-American or disloyal.
And so speaking of the president, big news reported in Politico yesterday, his proposal in the budget for cost savings to replace food stamps with food boxes, America's Harvest. Talk with us a little bit what the talk inside the Beltway has been about that.
Yeah, so apparently Donald Trump is going to be the new Blue Apron service for food stamp recipients. It's completely insane, and it's insane on a couple of levels, as people have noted. First of all, it's completely unwieldy to think that you're going to cut this program's budget by about 25 or 30% and then take 50% of the allocated money and provide a door-to-door delivery service is just off the top bonkers. Beyond that, this is a president, and this is an administration that believes we already have too much government, we already have too much bureaucracy, you're now actually telling people specifically what they can eat. It just sort of flies in the face of everything that this administration supports. And then beyond that, it's not going to fly with Republicans because there's a farm bill that needs to get out that actually provides protection to a lot of Republican districts in a lot of agricultural states whose products now wouldn't necessarily be included in these little food boxes. And so, I understand that Donald Trump is saying, oh, we're going to really supplement and we're really going to, highlight American-made goods and, and foods, but I think it's a lot easier said than done. My prediction is this goes nowhere, and it actually provides the Democrats with a pretty good talking point. I mean, if this is not sort of Big Brother, I don't know what is.
So it's kind of one of, the first instances we oftentimes hear things from the president that are his proposals, sort of his policies, but to come from within the administration itself, I mean, do we think this was top down or bottom up or some kind of combination of both?
I mean, it's probably both. And I also think that it's a result of what happens when you have agencies that are hardly staffed, right? Like you get crazy ideas and there aren't enough people at the table to say, wait a minute, were you kidding? And then that actually becomes a legitimate proposal. I do not envision this delivery service taking place.
Okay, so let's go on from these America's Harvest boxes. Talk a little bit about his budget. It seems, let's talk about the deficit and where it could or could not actually go.
I mean, the budget is kind of crazy because it adds about $1 trillion to the deficit in the first year and about $7 trillion to the deficit over 10 years. And remember, this is a president and these are Republicans who have prided themselves on cutting the deficit. Moreover, it is shoring up defense spending at the expense of everything else. I mean, the entitlement program cuts are pretty substantial, but even the infrastructure investment isn't anywhere near what the congressional Republicans and Democrats said would be required to actually provide a boost to U.S. infrastructure. So, it just seems like it's completely out of whack, not only with what the American people need, but even what congressional Republicans and Democrats have prioritized as vital.
So are we seeing then, do we think that is infrastructure really going to end up in the big loss column for 2018?
Well, it's not necessarily going to end up in that column. We have time, and what we've seen is a White House that's constantly willing to revise and resubmit, right? They're like, oh, this isn't popular, we'll give you executive order number 2 or 3 or 4. We saw that with the travel ban. We've seen multiple iterations of Obamacare replace and repeal. We've seen that with the tax bill. So, I don't think this is going to be the last word on infrastructure, but this should have been an easy issue for the administration. Especially given that Democrats and Republicans in Congress put forward a version that they were willing to agree to. So the president is just tone deaf, not only when it comes to Democrats, but even to the legislative branch of government more broadly.
So let's talk about POTUS. We've got a few more minutes here to chat about all things politics. Let's talk about your reaction, the reaction inside the Beltway to the official portrait unveilings of Barack Obama and Michelle Obama.
And they're really different. Right. And so historically, I think it's really important, given that it's Black History Month as well, that you have for the first time 2 African-American artists providing these portraits of the first African-American president and his wife. But I mean, when you compare them to any other portrait, they're really quite different. And, the Obama portrait itself is so bright and so vibrant and so stunning and so sort of nuanced and symbolic and complex. That, it's obviously there are going to be people that love it or that hate it. But I do think that, the people that they chose to do these portraits and the manner in which they wanted themselves to be portrayed is consistent with the kind of administration that they conducted over the course of 8 years. So, they're not milquetoast portraits, though, so it's not that surprising that you have a large portion of people saying, wait a minute, this doesn't seem that presidential. Yeah. I personally like them.
They are. There's been a lot written and talked about since their reveal, and that tends to be it, that they're quite unlike any other presidential portrait. And it was interesting to see the portraits, and now they're there. But while we have you here, I have to ask you about Kansas. How is it in 2018 they have not addressed the issue of qualifications for running for governor in Kansas, that we see 6 teenagers running for the office and they have just turned down a dog owner who tried to get their dog to run? 2018.
So as somebody who's, really focused on and has written a lot about why people don't run for office and why it's so important that young people do run for office, this is particularly interesting to me. So with the exception of federal offices, the U.S. Constitution does not provide any kind of requirement for what it takes to be an office holder, right? So it's up to the states to determine the qualifications for state and all local offices. Most of the time, the people seeking these offices want to hold these positions of power and aren't trying to make a point or make a political statement per se. When the teenagers decided that they could get onto the ballot, this guy in Kansas decided that his dog was at least as qualified. And I think that will certainly, the Board of Elections there did rule the dog unqualified, and said that, I guess maybe you need to be a human being. Maybe that's just a given. But, I think it does speak to this broader issue, actually, of election reform. And the idea that, especially if we're concerned about outside forces potentially affecting our elections, so many of these decisions and so much of the machinery and the technology is housed at the local level. Some of these localities and even states don't have laws for who gets to run or not, let alone how to count votes or how to deal with recounts. We saw that in Virginia, where a recount that ended up in a tie was then resolved with a flipping of a coin. And so, given that this is so important right now and election integrity is so important, maybe we can use the craziness in Kansas to signal that we might need some kind of national effort to make sure that we've got the right kinds of people qualified to run.
Well, again, Kansas making the headlines for all the wrong reasons. It looks like they're trying to put forth legislation to put at that state level a minimum age. I mean, does this loophole exist in other states? So do we expect other states to follow suit?
Well, I think the question becomes, states don't really fix problems unless they emerge, right? So, if the loophole exists in other states, but people haven't taken advantage of the loophole, then they don't necessarily have the incentive to do anything about it. Now, they might clean it up just because of this situation, but, generally speaking in politics, if it's not broken, it's not fixed.
Well, I say kudos to these teenagers, telling their teachers, sorry that my homework's late, I was out on the campaign trail. I mean, I just, kids will get out of work in all the darndest ways. Jennifer Lawless, I appreciate your taking the time to Skype in. I look forward to chatting with you next week.
My pleasure.
Okay, take care. Bye. Jennifer Lawless down at American University, as we do most every Tuesday. Get the sense of what's going on inside the Beltway. Plenty to talk about today. We're going to go a little more local here. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with our next guest at the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. I'd like to welcome in the former U.S. Attorney for Rhode Island, now Democratic candidate for Attorney General, Peter Nerona.
Hi Kate.
Thanks for coming back to the studio.
Yeah, glad to be back.
Give us an update. I've got a whole laundry list of questions I'd love to ask you, but tell us a little bit about what you've been finding on the campaign trail so far.
I think people are really energized out there. I've been around the state talking to regular people from Little Compton to Barrowville, Providence, Pawtucket, Central Falls, and what I'm finding is people are more than ever energized, concerned about where we're going as a state, concerned about where we're going as a country, care about the issues that I care about, want to have good, open, honest conversations about some complicated things. So to me, it's been really eye-opening just to talk to regular people in Rhode Island about me, the issues I care about, and my vision for the AG's office.
And what are you hearing most from folks when you say, I'm running for AG, and they say, our concern is, I'm sure it's a myriad.
Yeah, it is. So I'll give you an example. I was in Little Compton with a Little Compton Democratic committee, just regular Democrats in Little Compton. And what we did is we sat in a circle, and everybody went around and said, what they care about. So you hear about immigration, you hear about healthcare, you hear about the environment, you hear about criminal justice reform, you hear about public corruption, not surprisingly. So then you just open it up and you talk about all of those things. And I think immigration is a concern for a lot of people. That's a big debate right now nationally. Locally, you hear about healthcare, public corruption, our criminal justice system, the way it ought to work in a perfect world. And then you hear different things sometimes depending on who you're speaking to. I was with some of my Latino friends in Providence last Saturday night. Slightly different issues sometimes, how the city's being policed, crime in the city. Immigration, certainly. So myriad of issues, all important, all really interesting to talk about.
So you touched upon one that GoLocal had written about recently, and we actually talked with you a little bit about it as well. In the immigrant community, this issue of notario fraud, that people who have been here want to try to get work permits or perhaps asylum, that there are people who prey on immigrants here, and that there was an individual that appears that operated out of New York, appears to have operated out of here by lieu of who was in the corporation's database. But here's a segment of the population that is very much inclined not to go to the police.
Right.
How can this be addressed?
Yeah, and we found that when I was U.S. Attorney, there were a number of cases we did. One in particular comes to mind where you're exactly right. Not just folks who are undocumented, sometimes people who are just sort of new to the country, English isn't their first language, can kind of get caught up into some of these schemes. I think it's really important, whether you're talking about immigration or you're talking about anything else, is that people in law enforcement need to get out of their space and connect with people out in the community. So you got to connect with them either on social media, because that's the way we reach some people, conventional media, because that's the way we reach some people. In person, you've got to get your people out to talk to them about it. And you've got to, and I think in some ways, the state police and local police's policy on immigration, that they're not doing the work of federal immigration agents, can really help this by getting that message out there so people will feel more comfortable going to the police. And I think faith-based leaders, I think that attorneys, like Attorney Flynn and others, can be a go-between between the community and law enforcement. It's really important, though, to build that trust. But it's a hard time to do it, given the national immigration debate that we're having
Given
right now.
the climate and what we've seen, the particular case here of Lillian Calderon, who was detained when she thought she was going in So is there just, GoLocal has reported on this, this was a national here who was trying to just get some paperwork for her marriage license and was detained, and she's being held by ICE right now. There's a lawsuit against this detention. I mean, is there a chilling effect of you hearing that in communities, and they want to know how an AG could help?
Yeah, sure. So, it comes up in a lot of contexts, right? So, what should the state or locals be doing with respect to the undocumented, generally speaking? And I look at that just broadly speaking through the lens of violent crime. So, I don't care whether a person who's committing violent crime is a citizen or a green card holder or someone who's undocumented. Those are the folks that state and local law enforcement, and I would argue federal law enforcement as well, should be focused on. That's our biggest challenge in this country, particularly in urban centers. If you told me I had 10,000 new federal agents, I know where I'd deploy them. I've said this before. I'd put them in the cities fighting violent crime. So that's how I look at it. On this broader issue of what is our national immigration policy, what should it be in a perfect world? We've got to obviously have secure borders. That makes sense to me. How we secure them is a matter of debate. I'm not convinced that a wall, as the president sees it, is the way to go there. We need a rational immigration policy with secure borders. But does it make sense to deport people who haven't committed any crimes, who are working hard in their communities, have raised children here of their own, are married to citizens, have children who are citizens? Is that a smart policy? I'm not convinced that it is. When I was U.S. Attorney, we focused on people, including people who are here undocumented, who are driving violent crime. That's where our law enforcement resources ought to be directed, in my view.
Okay, lots of issues to talk about here. I'm going to jump over to another one. The St. Joseph's pension fund bankruptcy. Why is it taking so long?
I can't comment on that, except I will say that anytime you have sort of white collar or financial based matters, sometimes it takes time just to unravel, where liability lies, if anywhere, and what that liability ought to be. The fundamental problem with the St. Joe's pension issue is these church plans, which basically are plans that are not governed by ERISA. They're private. They're not private plans covered by ERISA. They're not public plans, which aren't covered by ERISA, which has more reporting around them and disclosures around them. They can kind of operate under the radar screen. And so, one of the things I think we have to be concerned about in Rhode Island, given that the federal government is not going to regulate these sort of church plans, that we could probably do more in the state to make sure that people who are participating in those plans get the information they need to make sure that they know what to expect at the end of their retirement. I think I think that disclosure, that honest disclosure, that regular disclosure is something that's really critical, and I think that we as Rhode Islanders and leaders in government could work on to make things hopefully better as things go forward.
So that's the St. Joe's example. We're looking at Memorial just over Pawtucket with the closures there. And the Hospital Conversion Act, does the state have to address this and tighten it up when we've seen these sort of failures on several fronts now?
Yeah, I think when you take a step back and look at healthcare, we tend to look at healthcare from a transactional point of view. So A wants to buy B, thumbs up or thumbs down, right? How much strategic thinking are we really doing about it? There's a set of criteria the Department of Health looks at, the AG looks at, but it tends to be pretty narrowly focused. And as we found out, pensions is not explicitly in those criteria. I think it should be. Whether it's the AG who would evaluate the state of the pension system, maybe it should be the General Treasurer. I know the General Treasurer now thinks that perhaps he'd have an interest there. Look, I think we can be more thoughtful, both in terms of reviewing individual transactions, but go up to 50,000 feet. Are we thinking strategically about healthcare? How many hospitals do we need? Where should they be located? What kind of treatment or healthcare services should they be delivering in each location? I think there's room for more strategic thinking about healthcare generally, but I do agree that the HCA, Hospital Conversion Act, probably could be tightened in certain instances, and I suspect that we'll see some legislation that will do just that.
So we've had healthcare professionals, we've had former director Dr. Michael Fine in here, basically addressing the very same concerns that you've relayed. Again, the more holistic picture of the healthcare industry. As a candidate for AG and in that position, could you push for that dialogue and conversation from stakeholders to say, again, not just the A and B transaction, would the AGs, could you have a role in that?
Yeah, I think you could. I think I think using that position as a bully pulpit to drive conversation and maybe drive change is really important. I found that as U.S. Attorney. One thing I could do as U.S. Attorney was get people into a room to talk about things that, may not just be about prosecuting somebody. It might be about criminal justice reform or getting people getting out of prison back into the workforce. You could get people around the table to work on that problem. Healthcare is not different. If you can use the bully pulpit, the convening authority of the AG with other partners to talk about healthcare and being more strategic, I'm more than willing to do it. I'd be more than willing to play a big role in it. I've sat with Dr. Fine as well and sort of talked to him about that. I'm married to a primary care doctor. We talk about healthcare all the time in my house. Yeah, there's lots of work to be done there, and I think the AG should have a role in it.
And so now we know, obviously, one of the things we're looking at now is partners with Care New England. But we've heard from concerns from President Paxton at Brown about jobs, about the loss of competencies potentially to Boston. Is that something that should be part of this conversation again, in addition to just the AB transactional nature?
Yeah, no, I do. I definitely think that's true. For example, I think everyone would agree who knows anything about healthcare is we don't have enough primary care doctors anywhere, and not in Rhode Island. So if partners were to come here, what impact does that have on the residency program that Brown runs with respect to primary care doctors? Yeah. There's a lot that goes into this mix, and I think it's important to get everyone around the table, not thinking in terms of a transaction where people have a stake, right, and maybe pointed in a particular direction, or it could be viewed as pointing in a particular direction on a transaction. But sit around the table and think about this holistically, outside the context of the transaction, about what's best for Rhode Island and the delivery of healthcare. It's not the same as it was 20 years ago. It's not the same as it was 5 years ago, and we need to recognize that and try to get good minds sitting around the table with some good ideas and move the ball forward.
Okay, let's move on to healthcare. Let's go into another area that GoLocal has written about in recent months. The developer Brady Sullivan, there are 5 lawsuits against this developer here in the state. Now, one of the things that GoLocal had done in recent years pertaining with Commerce RI was the Hope Artiste Village in Lance Robbins. There were some issues there with a tenant-landlord dispute. They put into place sort of a legal oversight team to say that there's some recourse if there are those issues. But now we're seeing it here on the Brady Sullivan side, which is not Commerce, it's not their purview. We've just had Stephen Pryor here. It's historic tax credits. But is there need for more oversight, especially when you see something, I don't know if it's going to go class action route, but we're seeing more and more lawsuits. Again, one particular developer, could be another one, not this one in particular, but should there be, if something like this gets to that level, that sort of Lance Robbins-esque team in place that the state has a vested interest in the well-being of its residents?
Yeah, look, I think there's this Latin word that covers the the AG's function. It's called the parens patriae power, and that's really a power that the AG can exercise on behalf of Rhode Islanders generally. And I think that's a power that really needs to be utilized. You know, particularly on the civil side of the office. You know, the criminal function of the AG's office, I think, is pretty well known, but it's got a large civil division that can do a lot of good for Rhode Islanders, and that crosses a bunch of spectra. You know, there's the environment, there's healthcare, we've talked about that already, there's consumer. This is sort of a consumer protection issue, right? The state, you know, the Attorney General kind of getting out of the role of representing a state agency and acting independently to protect Rhode Islanders. I think that's a role that's critically important. We tried to do some of that when I was U.S. Attorney, right? So whether it was the case we brought against DOT for them to clean up their catch basins, the DOT was itself polluting the environment. Whether it was the suit that we brought against Cardi to go back and make the 195 bridge the way it should have been built, right? So that's doing work affirmatively to protect all of Rhode Islanders, and there's a role in that across a wide range of topics. I think the Attorney General can do a lot to protect Rhode Islanders and as consumers. So much of consumer protection is about outreach, to let people know about the scams that are out there, to reach people. And you can't reach people the same way, right? I think we alluded to this earlier. Young people get their news like from Twitter, right? I'm getting more of my news from Twitter these days. You know, not everybody sits down and watches the nightly news or the 6, 10, and 12 broadcasts at 6 any longer. So you've got to figure out ways to reach people, to let them know what's out there, because the reality is many of the bad actors are not going to be able to be reached because many of them are offshore. Cyber is a good example of that.
And so, concerns for cybersecurity for the state.
Yeah, look, you know, anybody can be affected by cyber. My Facebook account was hacked 2 weeks ago, right? It was a great reminder to me, right? And an opportunity for me to go back and talk to voters again about the need for protecting your accounts. You know, changing your passwords all the time. But a lot of that is outreach, because the guys who are hacking us are not here, right? We saw this in the election, right? You know, the president may not be willing to address it, but you know, you're not going to go indict Russians and bring them here for prosecution. So you've got to go reach people and talk to them about practical ways that they can protect their information. And again, how do you reach Rhode Islanders? You know, you can't just pick one way of doing it and assuming it's going to work that way. You've got to figure out ways to do it across a variety of spectra.
And so, speaking of this administration, let's talk about prior administrations. Have you had any conversations with President Obama?
I haven't. I did see his portrait. I liked it. I thought it was pretty good. Yeah, you know, I love the Portrait Gallery. For any of your viewers who get to D.C., the Portrait Gallery is a place to go. When I was going through the U.S. Attorney interview process years ago, 8 years ago now, I had lots of dead time in D.C. while I was waiting to take a flight down there, and they interview you for an hour. So I would spend a lot of time
Go to the
Portrait Gallery. It's great, and it's free. And you can go, Gilbert Stewart, a Rhode Islander, painted a lot of the early paintings. But I have not had any conversations with President Obama. My former U.S. Attorney colleagues and I stay in regular contact. And Eric Holder's very active.
I was going to ask you about AG Holder.
Yeah, he's out there now doing work on gerrymandering. And so I get an email from him every once in a while, one of those those stock emails that says, you know, are you paying attention? And I don't know if he was, I don't know if he was asking me that 8 years ago or not.
Hello.
But it's a good community. A lot of my former colleagues are really engaged. The former U.S. Attorney in Washington State is now the mayor of Seattle, and 2 of my former colleagues are running for AG in Michigan and Ohio. So I think they, like many Rhode Islanders, are engaged. They care about their democracy. They care about their states, and really want to try to help where they can.
And speaking of gerrymandering, I just had Common Cause in here. They're putting forth legislation this year with the census coming up in 2020 and the redistricting. Is this something you're keeping an eye on?
Yeah, you know, the word is, right, we'll go down to 1 district, which presumably would eliminate that issue, right? If there's only 1 district, that's not an issue. But yeah.
At the state level,
yeah,
in particular.
Yes, in the individual state level. Yeah, the individual districts, yeah. As I've gotten out and spoken to sort of more state and local reps and senators, you know, Portsmouth is a good example. Portsmouth is sort of a weird amalgam of different parts and districts. So yeah, I can see why that would be a concern for folks and something to keep an eye on for sure. Yeah.
So here we are. We're moving into 2018. You were well on the trail. What are we going to see next from your campaign?
You know, a lot of it is just getting out and talking to voters. I'm getting around the state, you know, really on a day-to-day basis. Really, as I said earlier, really enjoy talking to Rhode Islanders. So it's just moving forward, you know, running as if, as I say, a tiger is chasing me, try to make every day count, try to meet as many people as I can. But I gotta say, you know, a lot of it is just listening to the issues that are out there. I'm constantly surprised by things that people care about that maybe I wasn't necessarily focused on. I have a vision for the AG's office. I know 4 or 5 things that are really, really important to me. Those things have been resonating with people, but I always hear 2 or 3 other things. And I will say this, one thing that is very clear to me that people want from their next Attorney General, whoever it is they want that person to be engaged with them. They want to see that person. They want to see them in their communities. They want to know that that person is thinking about them on a day-to-day basis. And you cannot do that unless you get out of your office. If you stay in 150 South Main Street, or when I was U.S. Attorney, if you stay in 100 Westminster, you're not serving the people well.
Well, I appreciate your taking the time to come here onto Bassett Street back again to give us an update as to where things are at, and especially some questions about what's going on here around the state. So, Peter, I appreciate your taking the time, and we'll have you in soon.
Thanks, Kate.
I'll let you around the corner. I know you're a busy man.
Good to see you.
Good.
Bye now.
Take care. Former U.S. Attorney for the state of Rhode Island, now Democratic candidate for Attorney General Peter Nerona. He's been here before. I have a feeling he'll be back here again. But lots going on, especially stemming from the reporting of GoLocal Prov, whether it's the St. Joseph's pension bankruptcy, notario fraud that we broke that story about just weeks ago, Brady Sullivan lawsuits pertaining to the large developer, and how the AG's office potentially could have a role in all of this. Peter just gave his vantage point on that as well. But be sure to tune in to GoLocalProv.com. Lots going on right now, especially pertaining to the Rhode Island Young Republicans. We have new pieces up this afternoon pertaining to that situation there. We'll have more on that moving forward as well. But we'll be back here in studio tomorrow. 3 o'clock is The Taste with Rick Simone. I'll be back at 4, of course. We look forward to seeing you back here. We appreciate your watching. We appreciate your feedback. Wish everyone a good Tuesday evening. We'll see you tomorrow. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel.